Hello everyone and welcome to Chapter 15. Chapter 15, one of my more, I like the chapter because it talks about something that's really weird, and that's intellectual property. It's about can you own something that doesn't exist, right? So like I can own this remote control, right? It's mine. It's mine. Can I own an idea? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about intangible property rights. Things that don't necessarily like physically exist, but also at the same time have value. So examples of those patents, right? If I invent something, I can create a patent, and that's protection that says you're the only one that can manufacture this. And that goes along the same thing there with copyrights. A little bit different. We'll talk about that in a minute. Excuse me. Trademarks, right? What is the Coca-Cola wording? What is the Nike swoosh? What are they worth? They're trademarks. The 3 stripes for Adidas, trade names and trade dress. So what are all those things worth, right? They don't actually kind of like if they're an idea that you can't you can touch like a trademark kind of, but like there's not one of them. They're out there everywhere. So the idea of owning intangible things that don't necessarily that are more an idea than something else. So patents, right? What is a patent? That's a great question. So a patent is it's a government protection used to grant you rights or your company rights or whoever rights for an invention, a process, a something, a new way of doing something. So you're the only one that can benefit from, right? Because if you invented it, you should get benefits from it. And there are different types and lengths of patents depending on what we're talking about. You know, in general, they're 20 years from filing, 15 years for a design patent. This varies based on, you know, if we're talking about medications or other products. So yeah, you get a exclusive right to use and sell that product for a certain amount of time. And the one that, you know, a lot of people we talk about in the US is we talk about this with medications a lot, right? So when a medication first comes out, there's a name brand of it. After a little while, there's a generic version of it. So other people now have, after the amount of time has passed, other people can manufacture that, the generic version of it, sometimes at a cheaper price. To get a patent, your product, whatever, has to be non-obvious, novel, and useful. So it's got to be new. It's got to actually do something. And it can't just be like, we all know that, right? Like I can't patent how to like do that and move air around, right? That's obvious. We get that. And then using the idea without consent constitute infringement, and people can come after you for financial rights if you're violating a patent. A copyright is a very similar idea. It protects the authors of like the printed word instead of like an idea or a new product. And copyrights are interesting because they can be very, very long. Sometimes they can run for the lifetime of an author plus 70 years. 120 years of creation or 95 years from publication. So the copyrights can be there for a long time. And you'll hear a lot of times older songs, like older, like 70, 80-year-old songs start to play a lot of places, or people start to use them again because the copyright has run out. So they're able to use them very, very freely. There are different statutes about this. They're constantly being updated just as technology changes, right? Because 500 years ago, the copyright laws, well, 200 years ago, the copyright laws were very different because nobody had a telegraph, or it was, you know, harder to reproduce information. Now, because it's so easy to reproduce information, these laws had to be updated along the way. There's an interesting concept right now, you know, and I think Taylor Swift is a great example. Her catalog of music and the work that she had previously done was sold. She had given away rights to her, was given certain money for the rights to her original music, and then it was sold. This was what, last year, 2 years ago. So she started creating new versions of her song. And I'm not sure if the owners of the music that bought the rights to her stuff, there's a really ugly gray area in there, whether she was violating a copyright of her own stuff by herself. If the owners of her music portfolio ever wanted to sue, it would have gone to the Supreme Court. It would have been interesting to see what happened. But in the end, both Taylor Swift was going to make a ridiculous amount of money off this. She made more money by this happening and then be able to re-release all of her old songs and get them on the radio again. And the people who bought her music catalog got a bunch of publicity. Those songs are still playing, music videos are still playing, whatever, and they're making a ton of money off of it too. So in the end, it looked like this big public squabble, but both sides will profit from it. Although I will say I feel bad for Taylor Swift or any other musician put in that spot. Trademark. So what's a trademark? They're designs, right? They're the things I said, the Nike swoosh, the Coke writing, whatever. They're words, pictures, designs used to identify a product, things that you will recognize, right? If you see the Apple logo, you know it's an Apple product. They must be unique and not generic. The holder must maintain the unique nature of that. And recent changes allow people to start registering stuff before they start using it. And then people sometimes will try to trademark different things, like the Kardashians have tried to trademark their own names. A lot of famous people have tried to trademark like different sayings or things like that. And if they're not unique, you can't do it. That's why the smiley face, just the generic yellow smiley face, was never able to be trademarked. There's a really interesting case about it. The guy who created it just didn't care for like 15 years. Then was like, oh, this smiley face is making a bunch of money, and tried to patent it then, but it was everywhere then, so he didn't maintain it, so it was gone. So trademarks are very interesting, and recently have even been used to force social change, like the NFL when they were trying to stop the Washington, what are they now, the Commanders, the NFL team, which were once called the Washington Redskins, which was deemed an offensive name by most of society. How did the NFL first react when the owner said, we're not changing our name? Well, they took away his trademark rights, which meant that everyone could now print whatever they wanted, t-shirts, hats, with the old the Washington Redskins logo and like team name at the time. So that means the owner was now no longer able to make profits from this because everybody else was making the profit and undercutting the prices. And they were no longer be able to sell like official NFL materials or this and that. So by taking away the trademark, they were able to force social change, which is a way that I never would have thought to force social change before. So trademarks can be very, very valuable, and either getting one or removing one can be hugely transformative. So what are trade secrets? Trade secrets are like customer lists, customer information, the way you do certain things. Coke's formula. They're things that are protected. And a lot of times you see trade secrets like with customer lists or customer information. The way you might see it in your career is if you work one place and maybe you do sales, you will be forced when you leave one company to, if you go to another company that does similar sales, to not take your sales list, to not be able to contact some of those same customers, because that trade list, that customer list belong to the company. And you'll have to like sign some contract usually when you get on to these type of jobs saying, if I leave, I won't work for a competitor, or I won't be able to take these lists with me because it's protecting trade secrets and different intellectual property rights. The idea of intellectual property rights when you go through this, I think is very, very straightforward. So I'm not going to, beleaguer the point. We're going to move on. And we're moving on to something that is very, very complex, international intellectual property rights. And I'm going to start with, before I get to international, I'm going to talk about two different things that happen in the U.S. I'm going to talk about two different companies. So if you're from like the Texas area of the United States, you'll be familiar with a fast food chain called Whataburger. Whataburger. And they started, I don't even know, in the early 1900s. And then somewhere in the eastern United States, I think it was South Carolina or maybe Georgia, there was another company, Whataburger. And both of them still exist. And they kind of agreed that instead of like suing each other in trying to find, get lawyers involved in all this, the Texas chain has a big orange W, much bigger, and just said, hey, look, other company, you do your thing, we'll do our thing. Let's not sue each other. You stay over there, we'll stay over here, and everything's fine. And that's basically what's happened. But what happens? Hey, look at that. I got a warning about my profile storage space. I don't care. It's because I record all these videos. But what happens when you have different countries with different laws, and how do property rights and patent protections and different words have different meanings all over the world. And this is where it can get really, really complicated, right? So read through this, just understand that there are different rules in different countries. And just because you have a product patented and trademarked or whatever in one country doesn't necessarily mean that other countries, the same thing will happen or work. There have been plenty of cases where some countries have accused other countries of stealing intellectual property, making it there, and then selling it back. There have been places where, you know, brand names are already being used, or a word means something different in a different country in a different language. So like, you know, Lay's potato chips, they're not Lay's potato chips in much of Europe. They have different brand names over there. So yeah, this can get really, really complex and complicated. That's what I'm going to say about it. You can read through that. All right. Enforcing property rights, I think that's pretty straightforward as well. The book does a good job explaining it, and it's been 11 minutes. That's enough for this chapter. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, I'll see you in the next chapter.